All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is part of our Respond, Recover, and Rebuild series, Reimagining Investment in Chicago's Neighborhoods. My name is Laura Trejo, and I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at Latinos Progresando. About 2 months into the role, I'm very excited to join you all for this conversation. About 1 year ago, we presented on community collaboration in the COVID era, highlighting hyper-local response in South Lawndale. Now we are pleased to highlight this partnership between Latinos Progresando and Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation as we reimagine investment in Chicago's neighborhood as essential to recovery and rebuilding. The pandemic has underscored for all of us the impact of the deep inequities experienced in our communities, but it has also highlighted the power of our collective strength. Our community is our opportunity as a city is to leverage the social infrastructure, not only in the times of need, but with the same investment and urgency for Chicago's Black and Brown neighborhoods to thrive. It's not only about investment, but it's about thinking about how decision-making is made, who is a part of that, and where the agency lies. We're also very interested in thinking about how we can build on and deepen trust. When we look at philanthropic giving, it is still an unfortunate statistic that Black organizations receive less than 2% of philanthropic giving, and Latino organizations receive less than 2% of philanthropic giving, all while any of the funding that organizations do receive is about 75% less unrestricted giving than white-led organizations receive. Latinos Progresando and Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation are both leaders in neighborhood networks. They're both at the forefront of COVID response and have come together to form the Accelerator Fund, a joint venture to reimagine investment in Chicago's Black and Mexican communities, centering Black and Brown voices in leadership and decision-making, and ultimately reshaping the future of our city to one in which all communities can thrive. With that, it is my pleasure to introduce Carlos Nelson and Ruiz Gutierrez to this conversation. We shared their bios and other panelists' bios ahead of this event. And so welcome, Carlos and Ruiz.
Good morning, and thank you.
Good morning.
So it's great to have you both here with me. Carlos, it'd be great if you could just tell us what brought you and Ruiz together and how has that relationship evolved?
Well, that's a really good question, and I want to first of all thank everyone for joining Luis and I in this conversation and our teams. And as you mentioned, though both of our organizations are lead organizations for neighborhood networks, LP and GAGDC had not really worked that closely together until the creation of Mayor Lightfoot's racial equity rapid response work in April of 2020 to combat COVID-19 and provide crisis response efforts in our respective communities. Through the strategy sessions and meetings that occurred 5 to 7 times a week, sometimes 10 times a week, sometimes on weekends, Luis and I developed a really good working relationship and a kind of I'd say a trust in each other. And then the last week in May, first week in June, we had of 2020 the explosive reactions to the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And there were reports of racial tensions between African Americans and Latinos here in Chicago. Social media posts advised Black Chicagoans to avoid Mexican neighborhoods as we were being profiled and targeted as looters. So in the midst of our COVID crisis response work to save the lives of our people, Luis and I and our organizations were now confronted with what was being reported as a brewing race war. This felt like a distraction from us really combating the systemic and structural racist policies that led to the destructive impact that COVID has had on our communities and the civil unrest. As leaders representing a Latinx community and an African American community, Luis and I had an overwhelming feeling that it was critical that we lead by example and we work together to begin to shift the paradigm. And so the theme, Laura, of stronger together felt and feels appropriate. And that was how we came together.
I'll add to that, you know, I think as a Mexican person growing up in the city of Chicago, you know, it is important for the Mexican community and the African American community to come together for the future of our city. And so during this time, as Carlos mentioned, we were meeting, I mean, Sundays, and you know, COVID was absolutely top of mind at that time. But you know, in order to really deepen our partnerships, one of the things that we did was say, you know, I reached out to Carlos, and Carlos, for those of you who don't know, has just an amazing food pantry that he was running during COVID. And I stress that, you know, now it seems like it's not, it was so much different back then, because this food pantry was running, we were running one here in Little Village, and Carlos was running one Auburn Gresham. But at that time, it was a time where people didn't know what COVID meant. And so you had very brave people on the ground who were out there as first responders giving out food. And so I picked up the phone, I gave Carlos a call, and I said, you know, I need to come and see you. I mean, this is part of building a stronger relationship, but I want to see the work that you do in action. I want to learn from you and your team. And Carlos was gracious enough to invite me out to one of the food pantries where I went out to volunteer. And that is also part of what started to kick off, you know, these deeper conversations about what change actually looks like in our communities and how we can do those together.
Yeah, and I would also add and kind of remind Luis that when he came out to Auburn Gresham and 79th Street and was embraced by the full GHDC staff and volunteers and working our food distribution network, Luis and I also visited the rooftop of the Auburn Gresham Healthy Lifestyle Hub, the 4-story building right near 79th and Halsted. And I got to tell you, it just being up there, just Luis and I overlooking the city and understanding that as leaders of color in our community was critical that we continue to forge our bond, work together. We learned about each other's upbringings and families and where we were from, and it really is a true example of how, as leaders from different locations, we are actually one and the same. And Luis, that was a great time up there on the rooftop with you. So thanks for joining us.
It was good. I don't like heights that much, but Carlos took me up there, and I was brave enough to see the great space that is going to be a new home for Auburn Gresham Development Corporation, which is phenomenal. So thank you. Yes.
Luis, you sort of mentioned that, you know, there was deep uncertainty at that point when you volunteered. And I think we're starting to see that we're coming out of the situation. We can at least reflect back on that, and we have some sense of things have improved. But at the same time, you and Carlos are both leaders of dynamic organizations who are doing your ongoing work, taking on COVID response. What made you decide to take this on, and why now?
Well, I think we're at a crossroads, right? I think, you know, we learned a lot during COVID. And one of the things that we learned was that, you know, our communities were not funded at the levels that they should be funded at. I think that was one thing. Another thing that we learned is the generosity of the funding community, because I think for our funders came out, and they came out in numbers, and they were so helpful, and they were partners in saying, we're going to raise money, and we're going to put money into the community, and we're going to make it general operating, and we're not going to have a lot of requirements. We're going to trust that you and the leaders that you work with know what to do with these dollars. And I have to tell you that right there is what got us through COVID, because what we were able to do is focus on local strategies that would get us through this pandemic. And so one of the things, for example, that we did in our business corridor, which is on Cermak, is we immediately started looking at the local restaurants and figuring out how we were going to support them to keep them open. And I'm happy to say that through the entire pandemic, we did not lose one of our local restaurants on Cermak, which is an amazing thing. But the reason that we were able to do that was because of the way the funding had shifted in our neighborhoods. And so that started to lead to conversations about what can we do to keep this momentum and this strategy going? And then how do we as leaders, particularly in Black and Mexican communities, take advantage of this situation, not just to build stronger relationships between Black and Mexican communities, but to really start to figure out how to get funding into our neighborhoods and have the people within our neighborhoods make the decisions based on what the needs are right now. Because what happens in communities like ours is that you have to move quickly. And sometimes the way the funding system is set up, you're planning 6 months out for a grant that you might get. Whereas if we can have funding available and it can be general operating, we can then start coming up with strategies that we can implement quicker. But also being, as Carlos mentioned, we're neighborhood network leads. We also know that there is a strong group of people in community that maybe haven't hit the radar for some of the funders because they're either just starting or they don't have the capacity yet to be able to apply to the MacArthur Foundation, for example, the Chicago Community Trust, United Way, et cetera. We can be a catalyst for those organizations to get them to the next level because we see them every day and we know how important their work is.
And I would also add to the question of why now. So Luis mentioned a couple of times the word trust, and he mentioned momentum, and we certainly feel that we don't want this opportunity, if you will, COVID and the challenges of the civil unrest, that the legacy that continues to persist. We don't want this to be a moment in time where funders are available to us, and after a year or 2 years, we go back to business as usual. COVID and the civil unrest highlighted many ills and challenges that we have known and been fighting against for generations. The 1-2 punch, of the pandemic, it really ravaged Luis's community and my community, and with the explosive reactions that followed up the civil unrest, that is. And so that ignited GAGDC and LP to work together. Simultaneously, or I would say in parallel, there was an anonymous donor that proved to be an early adapter of the vision that Luis and I had begun to discuss, begun to strategize around, and to formulate an implementation plan around as well. We also sought out a thought leader that would not only help us think through the structure of creating such a fund, but would also represent the very world of philanthropy that we are attempting to impact and to shift. Along with the anonymous donor, the MacArthur Foundation has been a great partner in working with our organizations, funding our efforts while acknowledging, and I think this is really important, the damage that the historic practices of philanthropy have caused in our communities.
Thank you. Well, we'll have an opportunity for folks to ask questions. I do, I've appreciated to hear where some of this, how this came about. Being newer to the organization, it's honestly been a joy just listening to the two of you talk and see this project develop. But let's give folks a little bit more information. I mean, we are looking at a 5-year project. And this is a question to both you, Carlos and Ruiz. What are the changes you hope to see at the end of those 5 years?
Well, I think at the beginning of the introduction that you talked about, we talked about some of the numbers in terms of how the funding is going to Black and Brown leaders. That's one of the things that we all saw during COVID. And I think that's the first thing that we want to change. We would like to be on par with our white brothers and sisters in terms of the trust that is given to them when funding comes about, whether it's amount or general operating. So that is definitely one of the things that we'd like to see change. The other, I think Carlos and I talk a lot about this, is that there are other dynamic leaders in this city that should be in this space as well. And so how do our organizations not only help to build this fund, but how do we help to build it in a way where we're helping other leaders in Black and Brown communities really understand this process and build it for themselves. So my hope is within 5 years, it'll be Carlos, myself, celebrating a lot of victories, but also adding to the circle that we're creating right now.
I would also add that I would love to see a reversal of the long-standing, albeit unwritten, practices of funding Black and Brown organizations, which has had the detrimental effects of kind of pillaging our communities of color and harming our environments through extraction, extraction of wealth, extraction of talent, extraction of ideas, while pitting CBOs against each other to kind of clamor for the scarce resources that Ruiz just talked about, guaranteeing that we are perpetually kind of reliant on the small funds that make their way to us. I'd also say at the end of this 5-year project, as Ruiz said, we expect to see an ecosystem of local not-for-profit organizations rooted in our communities who are sufficiently resourced, high-performing, and led by people of color, with strong and talented human capital.
Thank you, Carlos and Luis. There's a lot happening in this work, and I think one of the ways that we'll get there is through some great partnerships. We will leave you two for now. We'll bring you back shortly, but I do want to introduce another one of the great partners in this work, Haiya Mohammed, who has been a part of the JGDC team. Haiya, if you can just give a bit of an introduction to yourself, and then let us know how it is that you're involved in this fund within JGDC at the moment.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all can hear me well. I sometimes have some mic issues.
I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm not sure if others are, but if you, I know you said you might have to really...
Yeah, to yell a little.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I do have some mic issues. Oh, there we go. I see that in the chat. You can hear me. So thank you for that. My name is Haiya Mohammed. I am a program manager with the Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation. I run the Neighborhood Network program, so I have the privilege of working with all of the wonderful on-the-ground organizations doing critical work in our communities. In reference to this fund specifically, I've really been on the side of helping work through kind of the process, what we think the actual logistics will look like, and what it has looked like so far. And so I am here to tell you a little bit about that this morning, just give you a brief overview about what our process looks like at this point, and highlight some things that I thought were important to share with you. So one thing that I was really focused on was accessibility as a theme while thinking through the process and what we wanted it to look like, how we wanted it to be available to folks in our communities to apply for these subgrants. So that started with something as simple as the application just being in a simple Google form. Our panelists later can talk about this, but it was pretty easy to access, very quick to go through. And once we have all of the applications in, those applications are reviewed by an external committee. So I did want to highlight that the external committee is built to consist of community members, neighborhood change makers, and previous awardees of the grant. So once it's reviewed by the external committee, and then again by an internal committee, and the dollars are eventually awarded, we do want to give grantees an opportunity to share their experiences throughout the process, just so that we can go back and take that knowledge to help inform the next cycles, and hopefully improve it more and more to come. But that's really just a super broad overview of what our process looks like. We want it to be simple and easy, and we're really excited to hear about the work that gets done with these fast, accessible dollars we're able to get out to the organizations in our neighborhood networks.
Thank you, Haiya. Both Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation and Latinos Progresando very quickly started to release some of these grants, but this is also not a process that is new. to either organization through the neighborhood networks. A lot of this funding has been happening for a number of years. I want to now bring into the conversation Dale Kane and Nuria Ortega. They are two individuals, leaders of their own organizations that have relationships with the Latinos Progresando or Greater Auburn Gresham Development Corporation in different capacities. One of the things that we are excited to do is really expand on the relationship that we've had with these two organizations. And I just wanted to give Dale and Nuria a chance to speak to their experience with the organizations, with the networks, and then also with seeking out funding, which is oftentimes a difficult endeavor for small organizations. So starting with you, Dale, I'd love to just introduce you to the group. Can you tell me about how it was that you started getting involved in your community and the sort of work that your organization does?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to the table. I've been working in Auburn Gresham community for I think it's been over 10 years, actually involved in some of their community organizations with the quality of life plan. And excuse me, I'm a little bit nervous, but so the question is how I got involved. Well, I would say that I started with myself, just wanting to be a change agent, in my family, in my community. So I had joined my block club, and then I started to learn a little bit more about some of the challenges that we were having, some of the concerns. I have a background in health promotion as a career for over 10, 12 years. And so when they had the Health and Wellness Task Force, or the Quality of Life Plan, I volunteered to be a part of it, knowing that I can contribute something to it and what I was doing in the community. So that's how I started. And it's been a good journey, actually. Being a part of something, and then especially 10 years ago and now having a healthy hub coming to the community, which is something that I really had desired because I worked in other communities that had that focus point, and we didn't have it here in Auburn Gresham. And I happen to be a resident of Auburn Gresham for it's been over 30 years now, I believe, 30 years. And I'm always working outside of my community, doing good works in community work. And then I wanted to bring something here or contribute something here, right here in the community in which I lived in. So it started there.
Wonderful. And as I was reading your bio and even looking through Nuri's bio, I was honestly just quite impressed at how active the two of you have been. So I just have to say it was hard to synthesize that information down to a short paragraph. You've both been incredibly active. Nuri, if you can also just introduce yourself, tell us about how you decided to get involved in the work and what your organization focuses on.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Like Aspire, I was talking with my principal about how it's important the kids, they have the resource, and not just for them, for the entire family. Because if they have the resources, they can be more successful. But in 2004, a lot of the parents, they don't have the resources, they don't have information, they don't have the opportunity to know they can have it. In the neighborhood, they have organization, they offer this. So I think I'm gonna start a volunteer time to involve the parents. And for my surprises, when you work with the parents, you work with the community because they refer others parents or others persons in the community. They need resource. No, maybe they don't have kids in the school, but they still need it. resources. So I'm talking with her, and we start working to work with organization and the community to have more resources to support the education, but the support in the entire family. So we start around 10 families, and now we service 100 families, and we are so happy to this. Plus the neighbors, they don't have kids, and but we still live in our community, and it's part of we say Sprite family, but it's Little Village family, Marshall Square family. So now I'm working with Latinos Progresando to connect with the neighborhood with all the resources they needed, because Latinos Progresando, they make it immigration, but they created an amazing network, Marshall Square network, to connect it with other organizations. Maybe I don't have the service that they have, and we can share with the community.
Thank you both. So both of you have experienced, you obviously have a personal investment in the neighborhood. You have this connection to greater Auburn Gresham or Latinos Progresando, and you've been able to sort of launch something young, something new in a different location. What has it been like to apply for and receive grants? And you know, I can start with you, Nuri, if you don't mind. What I know you, I just saw you stand out, so I don't want to pull you back in too hard. But what has it been like to seek out and apply for grants?
Like Friend of the Sprite, it's a small organization, and our base is volunteer. Everyone in this organization is volunteer. We don't have a lot of money to pay staff. So that's why it's hard for us when we need to apply for grants. A lot of the grants, they make it for the organization. They are so big, they have staff bases, they have a lot of things we don't have because we are so small and we are based on volunteer. So for example, the last time we received one grant, and we use it, all this money we received to buy PPE during the on the time of the pandemic for the community. So in my team, they pay it like when you have money, you can give you food, and that's it. And in the thanks and the love of the community. So that's why sometimes when like opportunities like this, when Latinos Progresando, we have this relationship and we trust on Latinos Progresando. So when we have opportunities like this, it's not just the process is more easy. We have the support. We learning from Latinos Progresando. We have the support to say, I am mother. I'm not professional. So sometimes I'm still learning the process. So when we do this partnership, we can learning. And if I need to support, I can feel free to ask for the support. And sometimes with the other grants, we don't have this opportunity. So that's why it's hard for us sometimes.
And the Friends of Spry is volunteer-led, and Dale, Advocates for Community Wellness is also volunteer-led. Have you felt similar experiences in securing grants?
Oh, most definitely. We are also, a grassroots health promotion, disease prevention. I like to think of it as a ministry without walls. And so applying for it, we're based on all volunteer. Our board is all volunteer. And when applying for grants, I was reflecting on, it's like we don't have a grant writer. So we have to draw on the talents of our members. And I'm not a grant writer. And so, but we do apply. Some grants are so complicated and like 20 pages of, and we just don't have the, I guess I can say the capacity to, but we do apply the best that we can do in pulling our brains together and to put a grant in. We have been successful in getting some small grants, but I wanted to say that I've worked in professionally as an employee in well-funded programs. And then when I started my own, founded my own organization, we've been in existence for 2003, but actually I filed for nonprofit in 2011, and to know that we have no source of income, and so we rely on donations and sponsorships and grants to help to sustain us. And I'm happy to say that we have been sustained, but at the level that we're being funded, we can only do this much. With funding and the appropriate funding and being fully funded, we can do this much and more. And so when we received a grant, that really helped us, because right now everything is going into programming. Just to help to sustain and to get our message out there into the community of creating a culture of wealth, and that's WELLTH, and helping our community members and residents and families that are dealing with chronic conditions to reduce their risk factors and reduce complications, but at the same time, we want to prevent as well. So with the funding and having funding available to us, having organizations to, I just gotta, thank the greater Auburn Gresham to find value in what we do in the community to be selected to receive a grant. And that's the greatest compliment is, and that we're not, I would say a fly by night. We've been in the community for 10 years. With $1, I'll run my program. But if I have $50,000 or $100,000, I'll run my program, in helping the community for better health and quality of life. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
and it's
definitely.
that exact, oh, sorry. I was just going to say it's that exact commitment and dedication to the community that we love to see in Dale, and I know that LP loves to see in Nuri, and that I can confidently say that these wonderful women in front of you are not alone. We have so many similar members of our community, of our respective communities, who are just as dedicated and could benefit just as much from dollars to continue running their programs.
Yes, and it's well needed too.
You both started really with one sort of issue area, but clearly you're thinking about a multi-pronged approach to supporting your community. Starting with you, Dale, what is it that Greater Auburn Gresham needs to thrive?
What do we need to thrive? We need. Well, I'm speaking from a faith-based woman. Our organization is a faith-based. And so there's a passage that says money answers everything. And it's that when you have the money and you have the proper funding, you can provide the proper services that is needed in the community. And also having it in the hands of, and I'm all for, the larger organization that has a great scope. Yes, that's needed. But also the smaller organization, the boots on the ground, the one that one-on-one with the community, like with advocates, we go into the churches, we go into the park district, we go into schools, talking and speaking on health promotion. So what is needed is more investment into the community, and as well as having partners to walk along with us as well, leading, guiding, directing, aiding, partnerships, collaboration. I know with advocates, we were a lone ranger at a time, just doing things on our own, but we switch our are thinking and start looking at partnering with other smaller organizations, so that instead of reaching 50 or 60 people at our event, we can grow it to 100 and 150 and more. So through partnerships, collaboration, proper funding, having funders with the purse string having value in the work that we do in the community, and is willing to trust us that the money will be used wisely.
Thank you, Dale.
Mhm.
Nudi, as you're thinking about what Marshall Square and the Little Village area need, what is it that the community needs to thrive?
Well, like we start with Friends of the Sky. Friends of the Sky, it's like a group of the parent leader who is very active in the community. And I tell them we are working with these families, but a lot of the volunteers are mothers. So they take care of the family, and now they are leaders. And they are created the next generation of the leaders, because when a lot of they come in to help to the food pantries, they are doing PPE package, they come in with the families, and a lot of the kids, they say, if you my mother, I can do this, I can do that when we're up. So we are creating leaders for now, but we are creating the leaders for the future by the example. And I think, in my personal opinion, you can teach a lot of, and you can say a lot of words, a lot of things, but your example, when you are doing the job, it's the best way to teach the other how it's supposed to be this work. And the mother's law, do it is with love. So the next generation, the leader is going to be help the community with the resource, but with the love. And we need to do this in the future. And for Friends of the Sky, like nonprofit, we need to trust, and we need to financial support to keep supporting our community, but we need to the financial service to still grow up the leadership in our team and our other organization. But at the end of the day, keep this in mind. It's not just for now, it's for the future, because we have a lot of the teenagers, we start volunteer, and now they are doing volunteer for themselves another way, like increase the peace, creating programs, inviting other young people, say, oh, this organization is great, it's like created for the mothers, but it's welcome to everyone. And they love come here. And I feel really happy to see the work is like, by Latinos Progresando with this trust in us. So that's why today I'm asking if these people, can I trust in you and give me about the trust to LP and all the organization, they are doing this for us. We can still survive and we can still working, and we start creating the change for now and for the future.
Laura, may I add one other thing, one other component, just real quickly. And I strongly believe that there needs to be a base of education in every, even with funding or organization, education that comes along with that. When I teach health promotion, is education that comes along with that. Financial literacy, and I'm just drawing from my heart. It states that my people perish from lack of knowledge. And if I don't have the knowledge and the wisdom of how to, when I get this funding, how to use it wisely, how to use it so that it make an impact and that it grows. So it's not just getting the dollars, but the dollars with education and training and guidance that goes along with it. So, and helping a community to thrive is with investment, just like anything else. If I want my bank account to thrive, I got to put investments in it. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you both for sharing. We're going to have our Q&A section coming up next. So we're not saying bye to you, but we are going to welcome Carlos and Ruiz back to the conversation. You know, Luis and Carlos, I know you were just listening to Nuri and Dale. You know, how does this, I guess I'm just wondering, like, what is your response to what they've shared? I feel like they're definitely stirring things up in my mind. I'm just wondering what's come up for the two of you.
Well, absolutely, and I'll start, Luis, if you don't mind, and pass the baton to you. Such a rich discussion and some kind of key buzzwords and terminologies that came out of it. Of course, we heard the word trust a number of times, and that's a consistent theme when you're talking about a partnership and support as we are. I also heard the phrase appropriate funding and the need for appropriate funding. And I think historically, that term appropriate funding has been defined by someone else, someone not from the community, someone telling us what they feel is appropriate funding for our communities. So that's something that is part of this paradigm shift that we are looking to change. Let us define what appropriate funding is. The notion of everything going into programming, that's something that Luis and I have had to deal with for nearly 40 years combined, 20 years separately. And then the last thing I also kind of want to put on the table is this notion of investing in the long haul and this journey meaning not just dropping funds into the organizations, but continuing the capacity building, the educating, the training that must go into building out our ecosystem so that there's great health and wellness, mental health, physical health, financial health, and as Dale said, spiritual health in growing our communities. Luis?
Wow, was my reaction as I was hearing you two speak. Dale and Nudi, I want to just say thank you so much for all the work that you do. You are truly an inspiration to everybody. I can't tell you, and Dale, I haven't worked this closely with you, but Nudi, you know, Carlos mentioned at the beginning how, you know, during the first COVID months, we were working basically 24 hours a day, it felt like. And I want to take everybody back just a second because, you know, those first weeks and months of COVID, you remember going to the gas station and not knowing if you can even touch the pump because you didn't know what was going on with COVID. And, you know, at that time, again, the nonprofit community stepped up and, you know, we had to challenge ourselves to say, you know what, there are people in our community that don't have access to food. And so, you know, Auburn Gresham started a food pop-up, we started a food pop-up. And there's nothing more inspiring when you feel a little bit tired, but it's Saturday at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're setting up for that food pop-up and Nudi and 15 mothers from Friends of Spry come walking into the parking lot to help during this time where everybody was saying stay home. So Nudi, again, I continuously awed and inspired by the work that you do. And Dale, as I heard you speak, likewise, I feel that, you know, everything that you said is on point about investing in you as leaders today, but how that is going to make sure that we have leaders for tomorrow. And one thing, in addition to what Carlos talked about, that I think is extremely important and that we had been talking about pre-pandemic was the issue of people of color choosing to stay in nonprofit. And I think that has been such a difficult thing for organizations because what happens is that Black and Latino nonprofits are not funded at the levels that they should be. And although we do attract talent, at some point, here comes another organization downtown, maybe a foundation, maybe a corporation that's offering $20,000 more a year than what you can afford in your budget to pay, and you end up losing talent. And so there is a desperate need right now to invest in funding to keep Black and Brown leaders in the nonprofit sector. I say to people all the time, look, we have dedicated our lives to changing the world. We're not asking to become millionaires, but we are asking to live a good life. You should be able to buy your house. You should be able to go on vacation. You should not be looking at your bank account every week because you decided that you wanted to dedicate your life to helping people. And that's one of the things that we need to change. That has been a crisis in our industry for prior to COVID, definitely seen it through COVID, and that is something that we do need to change.
And Dale, I saw you nodding along to that. Have you felt similarly, like the talent, like it's just difficult to hold on to that talent long term? Sorry, Dale, that was to you. I'm sorry if you missed my. You're on mute. I just saw you nodding along as Luis was sharing that.
Okay, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so Luis is speaking to this sort of loss of talent that we don't nonprofit organizations are struggling to compete with other corporations, foundations, larger nonprofits, and in order to retain talent. Have you also felt like that's a difficulty for your organization?
Oh yes, the turnover has been great since we're a volunteer-based organization, and I've been in existence for 2003, and the longest person that's been with me is it's been about 5 years now. But I have had several people. The turnover is just great, because when you're volunteering and then something paid comes along, okay, you easily would go over and do that. But I'm also inspired by that they see that what I'm doing. Many of them, some of them start their own. So it's like a catalyst of, Dale, I love what you're doing. And then they go on and, start something else in another avenue or vein along wellness or following their passion. And so that is, but if we had a salary, I created a budget for staffing, but I just don't have the dollars to support the staffing. And so therefore turnover is great. Well, I used to manage in retail, and it's higher in retail, okay, what we go through in our organization.
Thank you so much, Dale. We have a question coming through, and so I just wanted to pitch this to you, Luis and Carlos. How can the guests that we have on this panel today, how can they support the effort, and ultimately, what is the fundraising goal?
So our fundraising goal is to raise $10 million within the next 5 years. And so some of the ways that you can support, I think there are a couple of really easy things that you can do right now. One is that everybody who is on this call has access to social media through your foundation, your corporation, et cetera. Please write about this fund. Post something on your social media, send something out on your newsletter, let people know about this movement that's happening and how we want to change the system so that we make sure that communities in Black and Brown Chicago are well funded. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is set up a meeting with Carlos and myself. We'd love to come out and talk to you and hear about what your efforts are, what you think about the future of this fund and how we can partner with you on it. And that leads me to kind of the third thing. Yes, become one of our partners. Let's have a conversation. Let's figure out together how we can move forward. I said this at the beginning. I do believe we're at a crossroads in this city. And what happens in the next year, 2 years is going to define what Chicago looks like in the future. We have a unique opportunity right now to come together as people in the city of Chicago to build out what we want our neighborhoods to look like in the future. We want to do it together. So become one of our partners. Give us a call. We'd be happy to meet with you at any time. And Carlos and I are also available for White Sox games. So if you all want to take us out to see a game, we're available for that as well.
Or Bears games. I would also like to add that, as we started this saying, now is really the time, because I do fear that there will be, a return to quote unquote business as usual. And our communities, this whole notion of community ownership and the community ownership model is so key and critical, whether you're in community development work or real estate development work. This work has to be done for us, by us. And I want to, tip my cap to the Pritzker Traubert Foundation, for a moment, as they've really supported this community ownership model through their Chicago Prize. But there's so much more that has to be done, and incorporating organizations like ours at the decision-making table, not at the receiving, not just at the receiving end, but at the table where we are part of the thought leaders and co-creating the funds, the resources, the investment strategies that are coming to our community.
We have just a few minutes left, so if as those questions are coming in, feel free to pop some more into the chat. I just wanted to share a couple of things before we lose too much time here. Is that we are going to be releasing a letter shortly, and this letter, I think, is a really great document that encompasses the vision that the two organizations have. Luis and Carlos have put a lot of thought into this, and so. Luis, can you share a little bit about that letter? Just how folks will be able to access it in the next few days.
So everybody who's on the call should receive this letter, and I think it is basically a summary of what Carlos and I have been thinking about and talking about over the last year. This has been a lot of work on top of already a lot of work that Carlos and I have taken on. But really, it is about building trust. I think one of the things that impressed me more than anything else during COVID was the trust that the foundation and corporate world put on us to get through this pandemic. It was like something I'd never seen in the 20 plus years that I've run this organization. Our funders and our corporate partners stepped up and said, we understand, we trust you, here's how we're going to support. We want to build on that. I think that is what got us this far in the pandemic. I say this far because we know it's not over yet, but there is something so special there that we can build on. And so the letter will talk a little bit about how we continue to build on that trust. And I think that this is just an opportune time for us to keep moving forward.
So far, I believe that our math is showing us that we have collectively, Latinos Progresando and Greater Auburn Gresham raised 1.5 million from these early investments. And so we've already had the opportunity, both of us, to launch into this grant making process. And we've definitely learned a lot from past neighborhood networks. But sustaining collaboration is hard. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Carlos and Luis, on what else goes into sustaining collaboration.
Before we get to that, I think Dale had her hand raised. So I think you have something, Dale, that you'd like to share.
Oh, no, actually, I was going to present the heart for the reaction about raising the funds. And I saw that it was raising my hand. So just kudos to the effort, the collaborative effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hearts
and
to
much
you
more
as
to
well.
come.
Yeah, Laura, I didn't know that you were going to ask that question, but I was certainly thinking about it, that it really, what it takes a commitment to the partnership. It takes a level of trust, at the leadership level on down. You might be seeing Luis's, wonderful face and my not so wonderful face, and hearing our voices, but our organizations, our teams that are really, carrying this weight and have been meeting together, working together, I want to say every week, certainly, or every other week for the last 6 months plus. Really, I want to commend you all, Laura, Haiya. I shouldn't have started naming everyone, Adrian, Lanye, there's others involved. And so really that commitment to each other and the commitment to the cause when you know what you're doing is right and needed.
I completely agree. And, it's easier when you work with people that you have so much respect for. I have not met anybody on the Auburn Gresham team who I've just not fallen in love with in terms of how they approach their work and their dedication to community. And so as long as that continues, right, and you continue to have honest conversations, which are very important, I think we can thrive. And just wanted to say, we have raised $1.5 million collectively, and wanted to just once again thank those early supporters for really looking at our vision and investing in it. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation with others, and hopefully you can join us as well.
So we have just 2 minutes left before we let people return to their likely busy schedules. Are there any other closing thoughts that you'd like to leave folks with today? I know we will definitely be following up, sharing this letter and a few more details of the work that we are doing together. But I just want to give you these last 2 minutes, Carlos, Ruiz, Nuri, Dale, Haiya, to just share about what else we can expect.
And Tara just dropped something, Carlos, so I don't know if you want to address that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and actually, that theme has been woven throughout many of the responses here. To that point, to Tara's point in the chat, I believe there are many diamonds in the rough here in our communities. There are other Luis Gutierrez's in our community that, working with them, developing relationships, cultivating them into a fabulous leader. Luis stayed in his community. He certainly could have gone on to make hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he's committed to his community, and it's incumbent upon us and the partners that are on this Zoom with us, philanthropy, corporate world, investors, to really get on board and understand that we all will succeed when those of us like LP and GGDC and other CBO partners succeed. And what we need are resources, we need support, we need trust, and trust that we will grow our communities and grow leaders like Luis Gutierrez and Haiya Muhammad and others.
That's why I love Carlos. You're awesome, man.
This is Dale. If I can say, as a new person to the table, that I say it all starts with a conversation, and to be able to reach out to each other, reach out beyond our borders and beyond our neighborhoods, to come together, to brainstorm, and to put a plan of action together, and then to implement that program. That's where it starts. And that I just see this collaboration just growing and flourishing into the years to come. And thank you for inviting me to the table.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Nuri. Thank you, Haiya. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Carlos. This is the kind of conversations that are just a joy to have, and that we will continue to have. And so we'll continue to invite others to be a part of this discussion with us as the project evolves. It's iterative and we'll be learning, but we'll also be sharing a lot. So we are now just past 9:30. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you for being in conversation with us, and you will hear more from us soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.